Hey guys, tonight's voyage is a strange one. We're easing into bed not with a lullaby, but with the totally bonkers story of why we say the things we do. Yep. Everyday phrases. Where did they come from? Why do we randomly tell sick people to kick the bucket or accuse overachievers of burning the midnight oil? Who was burning this oil, and did occupational health and safety ever pay them a visit? So before we tiptoe through etymological absurdity, hit like and subscribe, but only if this leaves you giggling or maybe gently scratching your head in confusion. Drop a comment. Tell me your favorite weird saying, or your least favorite, or just how many times your boss has uttered, "Let's circle back," before you decided all meetings are medieval torture. Now, dim the lights, flick on a fan for moral support, and lie back, preferably somewhere softer than a straw mattress from the 14th century. Pause a second. Have you ever wondered genuinely what compelled our ancestors to compare secrets to spilled beans? What was so wrong with cats and bags? Is throwing in towels a sporting event or a national crisis? And why on earth are people always urging you not to look a gift horse in the mouth? Has anyone you know ever received a horse, gift-wrapped or otherwise? Congratulations. You're now nestled in the past, snuggled up in the attic of language itself. Welcome to the bizarre, buck-wild world of phrase origins. Try not to let the bedbugs or idioms bite. Let's start unraveling with spill the beans. You'd think this comes from an era when beans were simultaneously currency, snacks, and top-secret information storage devices. Imagine sitting around, desperately hoping nobody knocks over your ancient clay bowl and reveals your scandalous little lima beans of truth. But as quirky as that image is, the real story behind Spill the Beans is rooted less in culinary catastrophe and more in the dusty folds of ancient bureaucracy. The prevailing theory takes us back to ancient Greece, where beans played a starring, if not exactly glamorous, role in democracy. Back then, they didn't have the luxury of secure online voting or little paper ballots. Instead, votes were cast using beans. That's right. If you wanted to elect your favorite philosopher to a new post, you drop a bean into a jar. A white bean for approval, a black bean for rejection. Secret, anonymous, silent, until someone, either by accident or by mischief, spilled the entire jar. Suddenly, everyone's choices lay exposed, and whatever intrigues or alliances had been carefully plotted were unceremoniously broadcast to all. Picture an ancient assembly, a marble hall echoing with the sound of sandals on stone. A nervous, toga-clad Athenian, clutching a handful of beans, perhaps sweating a little because he's about to vote on a controversial motion. As he walks up to the urn, he makes his move, hoping to slide his bean in without anyone noticing. But disaster. Some clumsy observer elbows the voting urn and, with a dramatic crash, beans scatter everywhere. The secret's out, votes revealed, embarrassing allegiances shown to all. The phrase "to spill the beans" quickly became shorthand for ruining the secrecy of the process, for letting out news that was supposed to be kept under wraps. Of course, this literal vibe eventually took on the metaphorical flair we use today. No one's actually exposing anyone's black or white beans anymore, unless someone really takes their bean salad seriously. But the concept sticks. Now, when we say someone has spilled the beans, it conjures that uncomfortable moment when the truth, however small or mighty, comes tumbling right out in the open. One minute, you're holding on to a secret. The next, it's scattered across the table for everyone to gawk at, like the world's least appetizing appetizer. What's delightful about this phrase is its blend of playfulness and suspense. It's not just about information being revealed. It's about that sudden, almost accidental nature of confession. It's as if you were carrying a handful of marbles in your pocket, And despite your best efforts to keep things steady, they all roll out and clatter across the floor, attracting everyone's attention. That same sense of surprise, embarrassment, and irretrievability. Once those beans are out, there's no putting them neatly back into the jar. And let's not underplay the social drama. In modern parlance, spilling the beans carries a whiff of schoolyard gossip or office intrigue. It might be a dramatic unveiling at the family dinner table, or a slip of the tongue during Friday night drinks. The phrase is alive with the potential for chaos. A little mayhem, a little mischief. We all know that moment. The room falls quiet. Coffee cups linger mid-air. All eyes turn to the errant bean spiller. Will they regret it? Will they own it? What will the fallout be? So next time someone beckons you to spill the beans, remember, it's an invitation to upend secrecy. Whether it's state secrets or just embarrassing karaoke videos. With every bean tumbled out, we participate in this oddly ancient ritual. A drama as old as democracy itself. No urn required. Just a knack for loose lips. And even looser beans. Kick the bucket. It sounds cheerful until you realize this means you're dead. But why a bucket? And was there an epidemic of catastrophic bucket-kicking incidents that medieval insurance agents had to process claims for? Maybe you'll want to check your feet before standing near any suspicious pails. The phrase itself conjures up slapstick images. What if Grandma tripped over her mop bucket, sending suds and soul into the great beyond? That's pretty far from the dignified exit most of us hope for. Still, our language has saddled us with this peculiar image when we talk about dying. But, as with many English idioms, the true roots of kick the bucket aren't quite so simple or comical. Like all good mysteries, the real explanation requires a little detective work. Picture England in the 16th century, where household chores were a hazardous business and the barn was the scene of both life's beginnings and, occasionally, its end. Back then, a bucket wasn't just the container you'd use for suds and scrubbing. In some regions, it referred to a wooden frame or beam from which animals and, grimly, sometimes people, might be suspended. Kicking the bucket was therefore a literal description of livestock kicking while being slaughtered. Not quite as merry as slipping on a mop, but there you have it. Another theory sometimes tossed around, less grisly and more Rube Goldberg, involves standing on an actual bucket to reach something high. If said bucket gives way, down you go. In the old days, criminals or the terminally unlucky would sometimes stand atop a bucket as their last perch before, well, their final drop. It certainly gave standing on one's own 2 feet new gravity. Whatever the actual origin, though, it's clear the expression kick the bucket isn't about household chores. Gone wrong. It's about the suddenness and finality of death, a way to dodge the uncomfortable subject of mortality with a wink and a nudge. That's what English idioms excel at, turning dread into banter. Notice how rarely people say, she died. It's always, she's kicked the bucket, bit the dust, or gone to meet her maker. These phrases are like verbal bubble wrap, softening the hard truth of the end. But as popular as kick the bucket is now, it wasn't always the go-to phrase for the end of the line. Earlier centuries were replete with even more eccentric expressions. In 18th century England, folks might announce that someone had gone west or shook off this mortal coil. Kick the bucket only really grew legs and started walking, so to speak, in the 19th century. By then, it had become sufficiently mainstream that writers and newspaper columnists could sprinkle it into stories, relying on readers to catch its meaning, no matter how roundabout the logic. Of course, the phrase's popularity might just stem from the way it neatly sidesteps the finality of saying someone died. Language gives us distance, a way to joke and deflect in the face of what we'd rather not face directly. When we say kick the bucket, we're performing a kind of verbal sleight of hand, redirecting our attention from life's ultimate endpoint onto something more absurd, gentle, almost cartoonish. Imagine, for a moment, a grim reaper waiting in the wings, frustrated as yet another soul slips on a clanging metal pail and tumbles out of the mortal coil. So next time you hear the phrase, kick the bucket, pause for a second. Consider the bucket, both prop and punchline, humble servant and, however accidentally, a symbol of our roundabout way of facing the inevitable. And maybe, just maybe, give your household cleaning supplies a respectful nod. After all, they've been responsible for more than a few tales, both in life and, if the idioms are to be believed, just beyond it. Let me know if you'd like any specific comedic elements played up, or if you want to add a particular anecdote or historical note. Next, let's let the cat out of the bag. Not a gentle reference to feline liberation, but an old-timey scam at the market. Picture yourself conning someone with livestock sleight of hand, only for a disgruntled tabby to make a dramatic escape right as you try to pocket your winnings. Now, to really appreciate the chaos of this scene, imagine yourself in a bustling medieval village marketplace. The air is thick with shouting vendors, the scent of baking bread, and livestock causing all manner of disruption underfoot. Here you are, wide-eyed and sly, clutching a burlap sack that's supposed to contain a squealing piglet, a prize for any eager buyer. Except, tucked inside is not a piglet, but a rather furious cat who evidently never consented to this deception. Of course, you've set your trap. The transaction is just about complete. Coins are poised in one hand. The sack is about to change ownership. But then, as all eyes avert for a split second, the cat, fed up and indignant, bursts out of the sack in a blur of fur and indignation, skittering across packed feet, right in front of your would-be customer. In that moment, everyone around you understands. The secret's out, and you, my friend, are not the cunning scammer you thought you were. You're just the punchline in a farmyard farce. The origin of the phrase is tangled in a history of misdirection, and it's easy to see why the imagery stuck. After all, there's something timelessly satisfying about the abrupt, messy reveal of a truth that's been hidden away, especially when it comes with claws. Over the centuries, letting the cat out of the bag has wandered away from literal farm animals and found a permanent home in the world of secrets, slip-ups, and sudden revelations. It's what you say when a plan leaks, when a spoiler is spilled, or simply when someone can't keep their mouth shut during a surprise party. But why does this old con trick still resonate? Maybe because, at some level, we've all been both scammer and scammed. At work, a project you've been quietly labouring over is mentioned accidentally in a team meeting. At home, someone can't contain the excitement of a big announcement. Or maybe you were the one who, despite best efforts, revealed a bit of information at just the wrong moment. The moment the cat escapes, there's no going back. The jig is up and everyone knows it. Interestingly, the turn of phrase pops up in all sorts of contexts, sometimes to comedic effect, sometimes to mark the unravelling of a big secret. In literature and the movies, it's the favourite tool of the plot twister, the dramatic reveal that changes everything. Picture the classic detective story. A shadowy figure is dramatically outed in the final act, the hidden truth made spectacularly obvious. Or, in reality, TV, where someone always manages to let the cat out of the bag before the commercial break, keeping you on the edge of your seat. The drama, the tension, the release. It's all baked neatly into those 7 words. And yet, no one wants to be the one holding the empty bag when the cat escapes. There's a universal wince at a secret spilled too soon. It's as if the phrase still carries a warning. Once you've let it out, you can't put it back in. Whatever truth, scheme, or harmless surprise you were hiding is now out there, scratching its way through the world, entirely out of your control. All that's left to do is to face the consequences, gather your composure, and try not to step on anyone's tail on your way out. In the end, letting the cat out of the bag is more than just a slip of the tongue. It's a reminder of how secrets have a life of their own. Whether in ancient markets or modern offices, there's always that risk. What's hidden today might be tomorrow's chaos, complete with fur, frustration, and the occasional laugh at your own expense. Now, prepare to bite the bullet. Once upon a time, dental plans were non-existent, and anesthesia was just a suggestion. Someone handed you a bullet instead, something to chomp on, while enthusiastic strangers did their best impression of a medical procedure. This was not just a catchy phrase. It was a literal invitation to clamp down on cold metal and hope for the best. If you're picturing a bustling, sterile dental office with soothing background music, scrub that from your mind immediately. Instead, picture a dimly lit room, a crooked chair, and a group of well-intentioned bystanders, one of whom happened to own a pair of pliers. Anesthesia, too modern, numbing agents. You wish. Instead, you got a tough jaw workout, a shot of whiskey if you were lucky, and more than one story to tell afterward. Toothaches in those days were a universal tormentor. The pain didn't discriminate between poet or peasant, soldier or scribe. The solution? Extraction, usually as quickly and efficiently as possible. If the amateur dentist's only qualification was, own something sharp, well, so be it. The bullet wasn't magic. It was strategy. Clamping down helped keep your mouth open, your tongue, hopefully, out of the way, and, with a bit of luck, muffled your screaming just enough to keep the neighbours from complaining. There's a reason dental extractions served as a favourite horror story for centuries. The drama was part theatre, part endurance contest. A strong friend or two would hold you still. The self-appointed tooth yanker would hover over you with a grim determination, and the metallic taste of that bullet mixing with panic became the lullaby of the soon-to-be toothless. Each extraction was a small spectacle. Some broke out in cold sweats just watching. In certain villages, the event drew curious onlookers, betting quietly on how many tugs it would take, or whether anyone would faint. Ironically, bite the bullet became a metaphor for handling tough situations, mostly because this was, quite simply, one of the toughest. You might walk away cursing, in pain, and with a suspiciously lopsided smile, but you walked away. The phrase lived on, growing from dental misadventures to become a universal battle cry for getting through anything rotten, whether it's pulling a tooth, facing an exam, or enduring another family reunion. It's easy to scoff at the old ways now. After all, today's dental chairs have enough buttons and gadgets to launch a space shuttle. You get numbed, pampered, and sent home with toothpaste samples and a sticker if you're especially brave. But back in the day, valor lay in gritting your teeth, literally, and trusting the fates, and your friendly pliers-wielding neighbour. If there was a hero in the room, it was the person squeezing that bullet and clinging to every ounce of resolve. What did this all teach us? That embracing discomfort, at least briefly, can be a necessary part of progress. While we've thankfully evolved past the need for literal bullets at the dentist, the spirit lingers. Hard things happen. Sometimes you just have to grab whatever you can for comfort and ride out the storm. So, next time you hear someone say, bite the bullet, before a tough talk, a gnarly project, or even just getting through Monday, remember the ancestors who stared down rusty tools and did just that. Modern life gives us numbing gels and laughing gas. But the courage to face what's next? That's always been a little bit old school. Let me know if you want tweaks or references to specific stories, characters, or additional humour. Break the ice isn't an icebreaker activity gone wrong at orientation, but a practical reference to ships ramming through frozen rivers, and not, as you might wish, a polite way to begin awkward small talk before a medieval banquet disguised as a TED talk. Historically, icebreaking wasn't optional. Picture hulking ships groaning under the pressure of winter, their hulls creaking like overworked floorboards, every sailor longing for port and warmth. Breaking the ice was an act of survival, not just passage. It allowed for trade, connection, and sometimes rescue. The perilous task became a metaphor, gaining traction far beyond maritime manuals. By the 17th century, even stuffy British dinner conversation adopted the idea. When someone broke the ice, they took the risk, said the first awkward thing, or shifted stagnant energy into motion. You may not be piloting a steamer up the frozen Thames, but the phrase endures because it nails a universal human experience, the moment of tension before movement, when inertia turns to momentum, whether you're greeting someone at a networking event or presenting a new idea to an unyielding crowd. These are the modern frozen rivers, where progress halts unless someone cuts a channel. Language loves machinery, especially those with dramatic effect. While some idioms bloom quietly, break the ice charges in, all brute force and no apologies. A phrase that tells you to stop dithering and make the first move. It's not about subtlety, it's about impact. This is why, outside of awkward party games, you'll find break the ice on dating profiles, business seminars, and in the fine art of emailing someone who definitely does not remember you from your 3-minute conversation at a conference 5 years ago. But let's not pretend the phrase always performs miracles. We've all seen icebreakers flop. That moment when a group sits in silence after being asked to name their spirit vegetable or share one interesting fact. Yet, even a clumsy attempt can fulfill the idiom's purpose, showing vulnerability, inviting the first crack, reminding others that it's okay to move, speak, risk embarrassment. In this sense, breaking the ice is less about flawless delivery and more about willingness. The ice crackles not only under the weight of ships, but under the gentler pressure of sincerity. It's worth noting that the phrase's enduring power comes from how vividly it captures the shared anxiety of beginnings. Think of a first day at work, or the hush before a performance, or the blank page waiting for words. The psychological ice is everywhere, and the fear of making that first break is as real as any chill given by Arctic wind. Yet the alternative, doing nothing, saying nothing, guarantees stagnation. In action, even hesitant action, there's hope for movement. Of course, sometimes we break the ice with finesse, and sometimes we shatter it with a spectacular belly flop. Either way, progress follows. Cultures worldwide have their versions. The Swedish ta djuren vid hornen, take the bull by the horns, for instance, similarly urges boldness, but break the ice adds the tactile, almost cinematic vision of something inert suddenly divided, made navigable. No wonder it's become shorthand for both bravery and relief. So, the next time you're called upon to break the ice, whether facing a boardroom of intimidating faces or perhaps just someone new at the dog park, remember its origins. You're not simply filling silence. You're enacting a deep, ancient promise that frost can be overcome, passage is possible, and what's hidden beneath the surface might be worth discovering once the way is clear. It's permission, not pressure, to initiate, to risk, and to move forward together. In the end, breaking the ice isn't about the perfect opening line. It's about being the first to chip at stillness, betting that warmth and connection lie on the other side of the freeze. Go on, give it a push. The whole river might be waiting. Time to butter someone up. This phrase originated not from someone frantically preparing toast for a guest they don't actually like, but from a sticky Indian custom involving smearing literal butter, which was apparently the original way to say, "Man, you're looking extra shiny today." People have always found creative, and sometimes bizarre, ways to express flattery. In ancient India, sincere devotees would throw balls of clarified butter, or ghee, at statues of the gods. The more devoted you were, the more butter you'd fling. Somewhere between reverence and cholesterol disaster, this tradition became synonymous with the idea of laying it on thick to get what you want, and the phrase eventually found its way into the English language, transforming from literal butter to verbal smoothness. Imagine updating your resume with excellent at both literal and metaphorical buttering. That's one way to get noticed. Today, to butter someone up means to shower them with excessive praise, sometimes so excessive it drips sunch down their ego like melted butter down a pancake stack. We do it to bosses before asking for time off, to teachers before confessing we forgot the homework, or to mothers-in-law when complimenting their secret recipe potato salad. The secret is probably mayonnaise, but embracing the butter metaphor makes it sound so much richer. But buttering someone up isn't just about blatant flattery. There's an art to it, a delicate dance on the tightrope between charming compliment and shameless grovelling. Think of that co-worker who always says your presentations are inspirational when you know he was napping for most of them. Or the kid who tells grandma she's the best cook ever, just as dessert appears. Who can blame him? When used well, buttering up can open doors, win favours, and smooth over even the most burnt of relationships. Historically, the evolution of buttering up mirrors the human hunger, sometimes literal, sometimes figurative, for approval. In medieval Europe, flattering one's lord or lady was often a matter of survival. A clumsy compliment could mean less land or a colder room in the castle, while a well-buttered ego might earn a few extra privileges. In modern times, the same principle applies, only the stakes are gift cards, promotions, or maybe the last donut in the break room. Of course, too much butter ruins the toast. And so it is with praise. Lay it on too thick and people see right through it. Nobody likes feeling like a greasy frying pan. Yet, if you master the technique, a little well-placed buttering goes a long way. Watch seasoned diplomats at a peace summit. Every handshake, every word is measured, but there's always a little butter, just enough to keep relationships sliding along. In pop culture, the butter-up technique is everywhere. Sitcom characters sweet-talk their way out of trouble. Politicians compete in the Olympics of flattery, and even reality show contestants compliment judges to sweeten the deal. We instinctively know when someone's praising us just to get something. But if they do it with skill, and maybe a dash of sincerity, most of us just bask in the buttery glow. So, the next time you catch yourself complimenting your boss's oddly festive tie, or telling your neighbour their lawn is the envy of the block, even as you spot the gnome army gathering by the mailbox, just remember, You are participating in a tradition thousands of years in the making. Buttering someone up isn't just a quirky idiom. It's a universal human strategy, blending history, humor, and maybe just a little hope that the world is better with a little extra gloss. Just try to keep your compliments smooth and your motives only slightly transparent. After all, nobody likes soggy toast, especially if it's served with a side of flattery. Ever felt hopelessly misunderstood? Maybe you're barking up the wrong tree, like a 19th century hunting dog, yelling at a squirrel that's already moved on to granola bars and better real estate. This phrase might sound silly at first, but let's be honest. Most of us have found ourselves furiously championing the wrong cause at some point. Picture it. You argue your case in a meeting, eyes blazing with conviction, only to discover everyone else is debating the color of the wallpaper while you're single-handedly rallying for a new roof. Suddenly, you're not the office visionary. You're just the baffled hound hollering up an empty oak. So, where did this debonair idiom come from? Barking up the wrong tree has its roots in early American hunting culture, back when gentlemen and their trusty dogs spent weekends chasing squirrels through dense forests, probably while wearing fashionably questionable hats. The dogs, in their eager pursuit, would sometimes mistake the empty rustle of leaves for a prize. Up they'd go, tails wagging and vocal cords working overtime, while their intended target lounged nonchalantly in another tree, munching stolen birdseed. The spectacle is both comedic and oddly relatable. But let's bring it back to modern life. Maybe you've spent months romantically pursuing someone, showering them with grand gestures, only to realize they're passionately in love with your best friend. Or you've spent years learning to speak French for your dream trip to Paris, only to find yourself in a tiny Swiss village where everyone's inexplicably fluent in German. Each scenario, in its own unique way, is a masterclass in barking up the wrong tree. On a grander scale, whole industries, entire civilizations even, have done the same. Think of scientific blunders. For centuries, astronomers insisted everything revolved around the Earth. Meanwhile, Copernicus and Galileo were probably off to the side, quietly rolling their eyes so hard you could hear it in space. Sometimes, society doesn't just bark up the wrong tree. We basically build a treehouse, invite our friends, and declare an annual festival in its honor. Still, there's something endearing about this archetypal mistake. If you boil it down, barking up the wrong tree is about passion misdirected, enthusiasm that overreaches, traits that, however misguided, speak to something wonderfully human. No one wants to miss the mark, but at least it proves you're out there taking shots. The danger is in lingering too long, hollering away while the world quietly tiptoes on. So, what do you do when you realize you've become the misguided mutt in the metaphor? First, take a breath. It's okay to laugh at yourself. Most trees can take a bit of barking. Reassess your target. Maybe the squirrel you were chasing isn't worth the climb after all. Maybe there's a far more interesting critter a few branches over, or a picnic happening on the ground floor. Recognizing when you're off course isn't a sign of failure. It's your opportunity to pivot, to recalibrate your energies, and chase down pursuits that genuinely matter. Some of life's best discoveries begin as accidental detours, like the dog that, missing its squirrel, stumbles onto a whole nest of rabbits, or, in less fuzzy terms, the person who, after years in the wrong career, finally finds their calling in an unexpected place. Sometimes, barking up the wrong tree is the only way to realize which tree you really belong in. So next time you catch yourself channeling your inner overzealous canine, give yourself permission to move on. The right tree and the right squirrel just might be waiting for you around the next bend. Get mad as a hatter, not because of Alice, but because Victorian-era hat makers worked with mercury until their brains turned to soup. Not a whimsical tea party, but more a fever dream in a felt-lined workshop with dangerously trendy headwear. To waltz through the doors of a Victorian hatmaker's shop was to enter a place humming with craftsmanship and poisoned air. The origin of the phrase, mad as a hatter, isn't a mere curiosity. It's a disturbing medical truth. Hatters in the 19th century routinely used mercury nitrate to separate fur from pelts and transform raw materials into those iconic top hats that became the crown jewels of polite society. Every fashionable gentleman tipped his hat without realizing he was tipping his cap to toxicology. Mercury, the silvery liquid metal that slips through your fingers, if you're reckless enough to try, is staggeringly toxic. But in a time before health and safety regulations, it was just another tool for the job. Hatters breathed in fumes for hours, day after day, week in and week out. The insidious thing about mercury poisoning is that it creeps up on you. One moment, you're expertly rolling felt, and the next, your nerves are fraying. Your hands are trembling, and you start seeing monstrous white rabbits peeping around the bolts of fabric, even when there are none. The symptoms read like a script for a gothic horror: irritability, memory loss, bizarre shyness, hallucinations, twitching, slurred speech, and a trembling known as hatter's shakes. The medical term, erethism, became the bane of the trade. It's not hard to see how Lewis Carroll, whose own hatter babbles riddles and sips tea with abandon, was inspired by real men whose minds had come unstitched at the seams, unravelling as surely as a hat brim left out in the rain. Behind the shopfront's polish, hatters themselves became unreliable narrators of their own stories. Records from the era described the Mad Hatter disease without irony. Even as the science gathered momentum, a report in 1860 pointed the finger at mercury as the villain behind the trembling tradesman. Old habits and old hats still died hard. Occupational hazard was not a phrase anyone recognised, and workplace safety was more about keeping up production than preserving sanity. Customers rarely saw the toll behind the fashion. To the elite, a new hat was a ticket to high society, a badge of success. But in the workshop, the price was measured out in teaspoons of mercury and years lost to confusion. A hatter who had been in the trade too long might struggle to string together a coherent sentence, yet his fingers still remembered their craft, even as his mind wandered away from him. Mercury's dangers didn't stop at the workshop door. Victorians had a penchant for poisoning themselves with a wild array of chemicals: arsenic in wallpaper, radium in watches, lead in makeup. Mercury in your hat was just another entry on the growing list. It's as if the era was determined to look elegant while quietly eroding from the inside out. As awareness grew, the toll became impossible to ignore. Legislation crept in, and substitutes for mercury were slowly adopted. But by the time the change filtered through, entire generations of hatters had paid the price. The madness became less common, but the image stuck. The Mad Hatter was embedded in popular culture, forever tipping his hat to a sadness only he seems to understand. So next time you see a top hat perched on someone's head in a period drama, remember the fever dream behind the felt. A world where style was king and sanity the cost of a sharp brim. The Mad Hatter is not just a whimsical fixture of Wonderland, but a cautionary tale stitched straight into the history of fashion. A ghostly reminder that sometimes the price of looking sharp can truly turn your world upside down. It's raining cats and dogs. If you're picturing a weather report with poodles and tabbies falling from clouds, let's step back. In Old England, leaky thatched roofs, and inconveniently placed pets made for spectacularly unhygienic thunderstorms. But where exactly did this peculiar phrase come from? And why has it stayed with us for hundreds of years? Let's unfurl our umbrellas and wander back to the muddied streets of 17th century London, a time when the relationship between rain, rooftops, and roaming pets was, let's say, complicated. Back then, houses were often topped with thick, straw thatched roofs, which provided cozy hideaways for all sorts of creatures: cats, dogs, mice, birds, and sometimes even a nosy neighbour keeping tabs. When a serious storm rolled in, heavy raindrops would barrel through the roof, sending not just water, but sometimes the startled residents of the thatch tumbling into the house below. So, if you woke up during a storm to find a pair of kittens taking an unexpected tumble onto your bed, you might very well have said it was raining cats and dogs. That's just one theory, and it nicely combines the grime, humour, and chaos of city life in Old England. But as with all good idioms, alternative explanations have sprung up over the centuries like mushrooms after rain. Some etymologists point to the old Greek expression katadoxa, meaning contrary to experience or belief, as a potential ancestor. According to this theory, when it rained cats and dogs, it rained unusually hard, in a way that ran contrary to typical weather. While this explanation feels a bit academic and less entertaining, it does illustrate how foreign phrases can slip into English life, get mangled by local tongues, and eventually settle in with a brand new meaning. Another possibility takes us to early European literature. Jonathan Swift, the master satirist, mentioned in his 1710 poem a description of a city shower that after violent storms, the filthy streets of London might run thick with the corpses of unfortunate animals. Yes, cats and dogs amongst them, caught by the deluge and swept along by the thoroughfares turned rivers. It was a dark, unfiltered snapshot of urban life. When it rained, the streets became a grim parade of the city's stray population. Whichever way you look at it, the phrase raining cats and dogs perfectly blends old-world misery with a touch of absurdity. It's easy to forget in our era of shingles and modern sanitation, but for centuries, a heavy rainstorm in a bustling city was less about indoor coziness and more about bracing for whatever chaos might literally drop in. Imagine trying to explain that to someone in a rainstorm today. Don't worry, it's only water now. Despite all its possible beginnings, what's certain is the phrase's charm and resilience. Raining cats and dogs pops up everywhere from children's books to weather reports, a testament to the English love for quirky, unforgettable imagery. Its continued use is a linguistic umbrella, a shelter from the bland, a testament to the power of strange history making its way into everyday speech. And while we may not have to check our ceilings for falling felines anymore, the next time you hear the rain galloping against your roof, spare a thought for those long-ago Londoners, shielding themselves from nature, and the neighbourhood tabby with nothing but a leaky thatch and a resilient sense of humour. So, while science and better roofing have solved the practical problems, the phrase remains. A soggy souvenir from a time when lightning, thunder, and unexpected animal guests were all part of the stormy scene. Who knew the English language could pack so much weather, wit, and whiskers into just 4 small words? Next, wear your heart on your sleeve. Far from a romantic gesture, it started in the chivalric chaos of jousting tournaments and awkward, courtly love, where your heart, and possibly your laundry, hung out for everyone to see. Let's set the scene. Medieval Europe, a blur of banners and steel, where knights clanked about not just for glory, but perhaps for a little attention from the peanut gallery. For a knight, the tournament wasn't just about unseating rivals. It was about spectacle. And what better way to catch the eye of a noble lady, or at least signal your undying devotion, than to tie a lady's scarf, ribbon, or favour around your arm for everyone to see. It was public vulnerability, centuries before social media, broadcasting your feelings to the crowd at large, and, given the stakes, hoping your beloved wasn't too embarrassed by your performance. This literal display of affection was more than a fashion statement. For both the knight and the lady, it was a delicate dance between pride, reputation, and risk. If the knight triumphed, the favour's owner basked in the reflected flattery. If he tumbled off his horse? Well, that's a tough morning after conversation at court. Either way, emotions were on display, raw and obvious, with no option to quietly delete your status update. And yet, while the phrase was born in a world of clang and clatter, its journey into modern times is a story of language evolving as we do. Wearing your heart on your sleeve drifted from the jousting pitch to the stages of Elizabethan England, thanks in part to Shakespeare. In Othello, honest or not so honest, Iago slyly declares, "I will wear my heart upon my sleeve for daws to peck at." With that, the idiom slips from literal favour to metaphorical vulnerability, painting a picture of emotional openness, even at personal risk. By the Victorian era, the phrase had fully shed its armour. It became a sign of sincerity in a society otherwise buttoned up and ruled by etiquette. Nowadays, we invoke "wear your heart on your sleeve" for those friends who can't hide their excitement, or whose bad mood is as clear as a rain cloud on a picnic day. It's a badge of authenticity, sometimes admirable, occasionally cringeworthy, always human. But let's be real, not everyone is comfortable with their emotional laundry flapping in the breeze. There's a reason poker faces became their own cliché. The world doesn't always reward visible vulnerability. Yet, there's a counterpoint here, an underlying admiration for honesty. To wear your heart on your sleeve is to choose truth over performance, even if you risk a few metaphorical bruises along the way. And so, the phrase persists in popular culture. From love songs to self-help seminars, and every earnest Instagram caption in between, "Wear your heart on your sleeve" bridges centuries, reminding us that our emotional openness connects us across tournaments, poetry, and awkward first dates. Think about it the next time you're tempted to hide your feelings behind irony or emojis. If a clunky knight managed to parade his crush around in public, risking both browns and bruises, maybe it's not so bad if your friends or your followers see a bit of your heart once in a while. So, whether your heart is battered, beaming, or just a little bit bashful, remember the origins of this time-worn phrase. There's courage in honesty and an odd sort of tradition in showing up, feelings and all, for the world to see. After all, publicly displaying where we stand, emotionally or otherwise, might be terrifying, but it's also timeless. And who knows? Like those knights of old, you might just find your audience is rooting for you, ribbons and all. Quitting cold turkey. Let's roll back to the days when dinner wasn't microwavable. Refrigeration was science fiction, and the only thing colder than turkey leftovers was the shock of cutting out bad habits with no warning. Imagine sitting around the family table in a world before Tupperware, before electric stoves, before the luxury of delayed gratification that is leftovers. Everything was eaten in one sitting, because keeping something for tomorrow meant trusting a cellar and the caprice of the weather, not the hum of a kitchen appliance. Cold turkey, that Sunday night favourite turned Monday morning regret, was perhaps your first real taste of abruptness, when comfort food morphs overnight into something less inviting. Its cosy warmth traded instantly for resilience and improvisation. That's the essence of going cold turkey. There's a raw, almost primitive honesty to it, You're not gradually letting go, tiptoeing your way toward change, with one foot still in the comfort of habit. No. You're yanking yourself out of the pool, no warning, straight onto the cold tile. It's conviction in action, sometimes courageous, sometimes desperate, always bracing. And much like that chilly slab of turkey, it's not always what your body or mind craves come the morning after. Ask anyone who has tried to quit smoking, sugar, or scrolling at midnight. The sudden stop is dramatic. There's no tapering off period, no gentle glide into the new you, just a line drawn, hard and fast, perhaps after one too many wake-up calls, or a particularly stern look in the mirror. These moments rarely appear out of nowhere. There's usually a trigger, a looming doctor's appointment, a risk that's finally felt too close for comfort, a loved one's concern ringing in your ears longer than usual. Or maybe it's simpler. You realize you're just tired. Tired of feeling powerless. Tired of waking up groggy, guilty, or anxious. Tired, above all, of tomorrow looking just like yesterday. But that jarring cold tile sensation, that's often the point. The discomfort becomes the fuel, the snap that shakes you out of routine. The trick is to avoid letting it curdle into bitterness or regret, like an unseasoned pile of cold turkey. You find ways to spice up the new normal. Replace the nightly snack binge with a walk, the after-dinner cigarette with a phone call to a friend, or the doom scroll with a few pages of a book. It's adaptation at its most creative, rearranging what's on your plate when the main course is suddenly off limits. Still, we'd be lying if we said going cold turkey is an adventure best faced alone. Beneath the bravado, beneath the I can handle this posture, most of us need a little help. In the old days, you might share your resolve with a neighbour over a laundry line, or a sibling over a shared slice of bread. These conversations matter. They anchor your resolve and, on rougher days, lend you just enough strength to get through. Cold turkey doesn't have to mean cold shoulders. And for some, cold turkey is only the beginning. The first day, the first week, the first time you say no when you'd always said yes. These moments accumulate, a streak of new choices. There's a badge of pride in that streak, one that gets warmer and more satisfying with each passing day. Eventually you realize the shock fades, the cravings diminish, and what felt unnatural becomes, with effort and time, your new flavor of normal. So, is quitting cold turkey daunting? Absolutely. But it's also a reminder, a cold, bracing jolt from the past, that sometimes the cleanest break is the most transformational. And that turkey? Given a little time and the right company, even cold leftovers can become something worth savouring. The table, after all, is always set for a fresh start. Close, but no cigar, comes from carnivals, where, apparently, the best reward for tossing a ring on a jug wasn't an oversized stuffed animal, but a stogie. Nothing says childhood memories like missing out on a cigar at the ring toss. There's something particularly memorable about not quite hitting a target, isn't there? We all love a good victory story, but anyone who has ever competed at anything knows that the sting of almost winning tends to linger just a little longer. Nearly grabbing success only to fall a fingertip short is a dramatic moment, packaged neatly into this old-fashioned phrase. And, as it turns out, that experience happens everywhere. Boardrooms, basketball courts, even your grandma's weekly bingo night. Picture it. You've lined up the shot. You've executed your plan. You hear a collective intake of breath. And then, thud. The ring rolls off the jug. The entire room returns to chatting about pie. No cigar. There's also a hint of good-natured humour in close. But no cigar. You didn't win, but hey, at least you can say you made it interesting. It's the phrase you toss around with friends when you almost guess the movie twist, or finally recall most of the lyrics to Bohemian Rhapsody. Sort of. It's the consolation prize no one asked for, public acknowledgement that you were close, but not quite there. There's a wink and a nudge to going so far and just at the finish line, falling just a bit short. Of course, in modern times, the no cigar part feels especially quaint. Still, we're conditioned to recognize effort and to tease those memorable near misses. Sports commentators have made an art form out of it. He almost had it. As if the fact that someone almost scored is an achievement in its own right. Our collective obsession with almost moments keeps the phrase alive, and there's comfort in it. Close calls are familiar. They remind us that striving for something matters, even if the prize isn't always in reach. But there's a subtle lesson tucked inside this old amusement park adage. It tells us that, sometimes, close isn't close enough. You don't get to walk away with a cigar just because you almost landed the ring. In those moments, there's a realization that life isn't always about participation trophies. Sometimes, the world rewards precision. The last inch, the final answer, the finish line. No plush animals, and this time, no victory cigar. Then again, close, but no cigar, also has the effect of spurring us on. Most people, having tasted the edge of triumph, want another shot. Maybe that's why the phrase isn't entirely discouraging. It's not, you'll never win, but try again. That particular brand of hope is part of the human experience. The phrase is a gentle nudge toward resilience. It tells us that it's okay to be frustrated, to commiserate with fellow almost winners before lining up for another attempt. And let's be honest, sometimes almost is good enough for a story. Who hasn't spun a tale of, I nearly won the spelling bee, or I almost closed the deal of a lifetime? These anecdotes become badges of almost glory, retold at family dinners and, yes, even at carnivals, after the games are closed. While we may laugh about missing out on a cigar, the stories themselves linger long after any actual prize might have. That, perhaps, is the best carnival souvenir of all. Let me know if you'd like tweaks to the structure or a specific emphasis. If you ever got news straight from the horse's mouth, congratulations. You either worked at a racetrack or had very confusing communication skills. This phrase rides in from the world of gambling and, yes, equine dentistry. But before you picture yourself prying secrets from a thoroughbred's lips, let's trot through how this expression actually galloped into the English language. Back in the day, think smoky racetracks and gentlemen in bowler hats. Knowing the best odds meant having the best information. And where better to get that information than from the source itself? Reliable tips about a racehorse's chances were worth their weight in hay. And the most trusted intel was, supposedly, from the people who worked closest to the animals, like trainers or stable hands. But even then, the most surefire way to check a horse's racing potential was to look right in its mouth. Pie, why the mouth, you ask? Because much like tree rings revealing a tree's age, a horse's teeth can reveal its age and health. Bookies and bettors didn't want second-hand gossip. They wanted to know, for absolute certain, when nation. Wami Shahs. Chuan. Truly as spry as the owner claimed. So the ultimate proof, straight from the horse's mouth, was quite literally a dental check. It was a way to sidestep hustlers, hucksters, and horse traders eager to pass off Old Bessie as a prize-winning colt. Of course, language being the mischievous colt that it is, the phrase soon left the barn and jumped the fence into everyday use. By the early 20th century, straight from the horse's mouth had trotted its way into newspapers, boardrooms, and kitchen tables, usually to mean getting information from the original or most authoritative source. It's the verbal equivalent of fact-checking. No middleman, no loose-lipped neighbour repeating her friend's second cousin's wild story about what the mayor did at the local market. The phrase is often used to assure listeners that a tidbit of news isn't just idle speculation. If someone says, "I heard it straight from the horse's mouth," you know they're claiming a kind of unimpeachable truth. Of course, whether that truth is actually unimpeachable is another matter entirely. It's become a favourite phrase among journalists, managers, and teenagers alike, all eager to parade their inside scoop. In the age of the internet, we might call it providing receipts or showing the screenshots, but the idea remains the same. Skip the whispers. Go to the source. Along the way, straight from the horse's mouth has kept its knack for painting a vivid, almost comical mental image. Picture a horse leaning in, whispering the track's best-kept secret, or perhaps rolling its eyes at the gossip swirling in the betting hall. The phrase's folksy charm and layers of meaning have helped it endure, even as the days of the dusty racetrack have faded into nostalgia. It reminds us that no matter how advanced our technology gets, we still value information that comes directly from the original wellspring, be that a horse or a human. And let's not overlook the tongue-in-cheek humour built into the expression. Like much of English idiom, straight from the horse's mouth invites both literal and figurative interpretation. An inside joke for language lovers who appreciate a blend of wit, history, and practicality. It's the kind of phrase you can drop into conversation to claim authority, spark a smile, or gently rib someone for their penchant for rumours. So, the next time you're eager to assure someone of your information's veracity, remember, while your source may not have a mane or a penchant for carrots, you're upholding a colourful tradition rooted in the quest for certainty. Just don't try to check anyone's teeth at the meeting. You might have some explaining to do. To burn the midnight oil is to work late. In a pre-electric light world, this wasn't a humble brag about your side hustle. It was literally risking your eyebrows in pursuit of paperwork with only a flickering flame between you and a house fire. But where did this phrase come from? And why does it still glow in our vocabulary? The answer goes beyond just a cool idiom about working after hours. Imagine a world where sunset slammed the door on productivity. If inspiration hit at 9 p.m, you either seized it by lamplight or surrendered until morning. Oil lamps, using whale oil, olive oil, or even animal fat, were your only weapons against the encroaching dark. This was commitment with a whiff of danger, a moment's carelessness, and your midnight brainstorm could turn into a midnight blaze. Writers and scholars were the original midnight oil burners. In the days before fluorescent glare, completing your magnum opus or deciphering legal tomes required a steady hand, a sharp mind, and the resolve to breathe in the faint aroma of charred wick. The flicker of the lamp warped shadows on the wall, making the ordinary hours of study feel like a gothic adventure. Every page written or scribble made at that hour was a little rebellion against time itself. But burning the midnight oil wasn't always romantic. For many, it was a necessity born of circumstance, not choice. Picture a clerk surrounded by endless ledgers, the count of brass candlesticks dwindling as quickly as the ink on his quill. Or think of factory workers and seamstresses, eyes strained by poor light, trying desperately to hit their quotas before dawn. If you've ever felt weary staring at the blue light of your computer at 2 a.m, you're in good company, except now the only thing at risk is your circadian rhythm, not your wallpaper. With industrialization came a shift. Oil lamps were replaced by gas, and then by electric bulbs. But the midnight spirit lingered. Culture came to treat late-night labour with a mix of awe and sympathy. In literature and film, burning the midnight oil-painted characters as either valiant heroes or tragic workaholics. Dickens' Ebenezer Scrooge, hunched over his ledger by candlelight, is iconic. A man made grim and solitary by the demands of late-night toil. Curiously, the phrase also became aspirational. By the 20th century, to burn the midnight oil suggested admirable diligence, the kind of grit that led to innovation or last-minute genius. Students crammed for exams. Entrepreneurs stayed up plotting their empire's next move. Inventors paced their workshops in the moonlit quiet. In each case, the cost was sleep, but the reward, supposedly, was progress. Yet, there's a cautionary tale embedded in this burnished idiom. Chronic midnight oil burners, past and present, encounter the limits of human endurance. Medical journals may not have had their say in the 1800s, but today we know prolonged night work chips away at health, mood, and sometimes creativity itself. Modern wisdom suggests, sure, light a candle in the dark, but don't let it run all the way down. So next time you find yourself chasing deadlines at midnight, remember, you're part of a long, smoky tradition. The glow of your desk lamp is the distant cousin of the feeble flame that once protected a lone scholar's work. Maybe you're not risking a house fire, but you are gambling with a good night's sleep. And, while the fuel has changed, the spirit remains. A testament to the ingenuity, or stubbornness, of those determined to get things done, no matter what the clock says. Whether it's for ambition, necessity, or a flash of inspiration you swear won't wait until morning, burning the midnight oil connects us to generations who pressed on into the night. Just remember, stretch, hydrate, and if you must light a candle for effect, maybe keep a fire extinguisher handy. Some traditions are better kept metaphorical. Silence. Awkward. You know the feeling. Someone asks, "Cat got your tongue?" Legend suggests a history of smug Egyptian deities and pirates fond of cutting out the tongues of their enemies. Suddenly, being at a loss for words sounds preferable. But why do we freeze up? Why does conversation sometimes slip through our fingers, leaving us wordless, staring into space as time ticks on and the silence thickens? Maybe you're sitting in a buzzing cafe, coffee cooling as your date looks expectantly your way. Or maybe it's at a family dinner, uncle's joke hanging in the air, everyone waiting for your comeback. And poof, the words vanish. Let's rewind for a moment to where this phrase may have bloomed. The cat got your tongue. Idiom has prowled the English language since at least the late 19th century. Rooted in folklore, it allegedly hints at ancient punishments, or the fierce cats of Egyptian mythology, both partial to, well, keeping tongues. While hard historical proof is lacking, one thing's for sure. When you're tongue-tied, even the wildest legend seems plausible. But the real magic, or mischief, happens in the moment itself. Our brains are intricate machines, engineered for quick-fire speech, yet perfectly capable of stage fright. When spotlighted, whether by a teacher, boss, or witty friend, we become acutely aware of every word, every possible slip. Psychology calls this the spotlight effect, our tendency to overestimate how closely others are watching us. The result? Panic. The mind blanks, and suddenly you're wishing for an actual cat to blame. Here's the secret though. Silence isn't always the enemy. In some cultures, a pause signals thoughtfulness, respect, even wisdom. In others, it's a marker for awkwardness, a conversational pothole to swerve around. Still, whether you shrug it off with a laugh or let it draw out until someone else fills the void, silence shapes the rhythm of our dialogues. Yet, cat got your tongue never just floats as a neutral observation. It's a nudge, a challenge, a dare to break the silence, to be witty, to prove you've got something to say. And it tends to show up at the worst possible moments. A teacher calls on you when your mind's replaying your lunch order. Your boss tosses you a question mid-meeting, and suddenly your brain's stuck on replay. Or you're at a party, swept into a circle of chatter, and you wish you'd rehearsed some clever retorts in the mirror. If you've been on the receiving end, you know that hot flush, cheeks stinging, heart tapping a Morse code of distress. Funny thing is, even seasoned speakers, witticists, and chat show hosts confess to moments of brain lock. It's entirely human, an odd badge of social interaction. There's a myth that quick thinking is all instinct, some magical brain wiring that the rest of us just lack. But pause and scan the world's best interviewers or stand-up comedians. They embrace silence, use it as punctuation, and let their words percolate. The difference? They've learned to dance with their cat got your tongue moments instead of battling them. Here's a twist. The next time someone tuts, cat got your tongue, don't scramble to fill the space. Smile. Let the silence be your answer, or maybe flip the question on its head. Maybe the cat's just guarding your best ideas for the right moment. After all, some of the world's sharpest insights have clawed their way out of long, thoughtful pauses. Because in the end, whether tangled up in history, culture, or our own nervous energy, that phrase is a reminder. Even when you're lost for words, you're still part of the conversation. Sometimes a little silence is just what the story, any story, needs. Welcome to the eternal hypocrisy of the pot calling the kettle black. In an age of soot-covered kitchenware, it was easy for everyone to be a little potty. Nowadays, it's the unofficial motto of Twitter. But how did this seemingly simple kitchen squabble get promoted to the podium of universal truths? The phrase, first whistled out of Europe's chimneys back in the days when kitchens were smoky battlefields, and both pots and kettles would emerge from the fray, equally blackened and equally oblivious. The true comedic genius. Each one wondering aloud how the other managed to get so dirty. Fast forward a few hundred years and, well, the kitchen hasn't changed as much as we'd like to think. It's just moved online, with hashtags instead of frying pans. Let's take a stroll through the heart of this idiom. The insatiable human appetite for hypocrisy. No matter the century, humans have always excelled at noticing the flaws in others, while ignoring the ones tap dancing across their own noses. Enter social media, that modern amphitheatre where every opinion, half-baked or otherwise, gets its turn under the cruel spotlight. Now, being a pot or kettle armed with a Twitter account is basically a competitive sport with bonus points for irony. Take, for example, the notorious online call-out. There's nothing quite like watching someone rake another's grammar over the coals, while generously scattering their their own typos throughout their 280-character opus, or the person crusading against online negativity, pausing only to leave a trail of snark and bitterness in every comment section they visit. It's as if the internet is one big kitchen, still swirling with soot, and we're all determined to point fingers from our own blackened perches. But the phenomenon is not just digital. Think of the workplace, the colleague who lectures about punctuality, yet is always the last one through the door. Or the neighbour who files noise complaints but hosts a weekly late-night karaoke jam that could summon the local wildlife. Pot calling the kettle black isn't just a phrase. It's the unofficial slogan of office politics, local committees, and family reunions. And the beauty of the idiom is in its universality. It doesn't matter if you're the Prime Minister, the head of your HOA, or just someone arguing online about pineapple on pizza. The rules are the same. If you're busy pointing out a flaw, chances are you've got a matching set at home. The ancient philosophers might have waxed poetic about self-awareness, but even Socrates would double-tap a juicy hypocrisy thread. In dissecting why we're so drawn to this behavior, science offers a gentle nudge. It's far easier to spot faults in others than admit our own. Cognitive bias is the kitchen soot of the mind, coating every surface and blurring our ability to see things clearly, especially our own reflection. But there's hope. Recognizing the pot and kettle tango is the first step toward wisdom, or at least toward fewer embarrassing moments online. Next time you're tempted to call someone out, maybe pause and check the state of your own cookware. Or, for a more 21st century take, perform a quick tweet audit. Are your online hands as clean as you imagine? In closing, the next time you find yourself mid-scorch in a comment thread, remember, there's a good chance you're holding a kettle and someone's about to point out the soot. The truth is, we're all a little blackened around the edges. Instead of pointing fingers, maybe it's time to start a kitchen cleanup plan, or, at the very least, embrace our collective sooty humanity with a touch of humility. After all, mocking the pot for being dark is just adding another layer to your own sheen. Why must one cut the mustard? Turns out, this tough, spicy condiment was a test of quality, not lunch. If you met the mustard standard, you were officially hot stuff, or just ready for sandwich duty. The phrase "cut the mustard" originated over a century ago, but its true essence has little to do with slicing through tangy yellow spread. Instead, it's about proving yourself, measuring up where it counts. Think of it as society's culinary trial by fire. Mustard, with its robust flavour and hard-to-tame seeds, was historically seen as a metaphor for the kind of bold resolve required to get things done. If you could cut it, you didn't just blend in, you stood out. Imagine a crew of old-timey mustard grinders, aprons dusted in yellow, sweat on their brows, hands stained by hours of effort. Mustard is notorious for being stubborn, needing steel and grit to grind those tiny, determined seeds. Not every apprentice had the stamina. Only the most dedicated could see the job through. In that world, cutting the mustard wasn't just an idiom. It was a badge of pride. You were no longer a rookie. You were proven. You belonged. But why mustard, and not some other, less dramatic condiment? Ketchup, after all, is content to let gravity do the work. Mayonnaise waits patiently to be spread. Mustard, though, bites back. To cut the mustard, you had to meet a higher bar, deal with the spice, and show you could bring out flavours that others missed. The phrase soon moved from kitchens to more metaphorical battlegrounds. Sports teams talked about players who couldn't cut the mustard when it mattered most. Bosses quietly worried whether the new hire would cut it on the big project. No one wanted to be the one who didn't add up. Of course, as with many phrases, folks have tried to pin "cut the mustard" to all kinds of origins. Some sniff out military history, linking it to World War I, when soldiers, many hailing from farming families, would talk of harvests that cut the mustard. Others point to 19th century writer O. Henry, whose stories used the phrase to describe sharp young upstarts and the people who measured up under pressure. Through it all, the common ingredient is the notion of grit and capability. There's no room for bland or half-hearted here. The expression still pops up in everyday life, usually at crossroads moments. Maybe you're prepping for a job interview, eyes on the mirror, rehearsing answers, hoping you look the part and cut the mustard. Or perhaps it's the last seconds of a home-cooked meal. You taste the gravy, frown, and mutter to yourself, This just doesn't cut the mustard," before scrambling for more salt. We use it, knowingly or not, to ask, is this enough? Am I up to the task? Beneath its spicy exterior, the phrase is an invitation. It challenges us not to be just another bland spread on the world's sandwich. We're called to bring heat and flavour, character that stands out. Each time you hear it, remember the stubborn grinders, the spicy seeds, and those moments of doubt that call for one more try. Cut the mustard is more than a quirky saying. It's a reminder that somewhere, someone is hoping you'll go beyond the bland and pack a little punch. So the next time you find yourself facing a test, can I make this work? Can I really cut the mustard? Think of the grit behind the words. Channel that old world determination. Muster your courage. And if all else fails, remember, sometimes the best things in life are the ones that bring a bit of a bite. Ancient Romans literally took things with a grain of salt, whether the thing was a truth, a toad, or a suspicious business deal. And we still use it because everyone loves a little seasoning with their skepticism. But what does it really mean to take something with a grain of salt? And where did this spicy piece of wisdom come from? The phrase pops up in the works of Pliny the Elder, an original Roman encyclopedist who apparently had an opinion on everything from volcanoes to the best way to pickle a fish. According to Pliny, a grain of salt was the antidote in a recipe for combating poison. In other words, salt wasn't just a condiment, it was a literal lifesaver. If someone tried to hand you a suspicious potion, as one apparently did on Tuesdays in ancient Rome, you'd reach for your trusty sodium chloride and hope for the best. Over time, the phrase morphed into a metaphor for healthy skepticism. If a friend tells you that her cousin's hairdresser's neighbour saw Bigfoot at a miniature golf course, you don't empty the proverbial salt shaker. Instead, you sprinkle just enough to flavour the story, enough to acknowledge its entertainment value, but not so much that you immediately buy hiking boots and a thermos labelled Bigfoot bait. Fast forward to today, and taking things with a grain of salt has become a necessary life skill, especially if you spend more than 2 minutes a day on the internet. Modern life bombards us with a buffet of facts, semi-facts, and "I can't believe this happened" headlines. Every scroll promises snake oil, miracle cures, and the occasional minor celebrity running for office. The salt, in this context, is our built-in filter, our ability to pause, squint, and ask, wait a minute, does that add up? Of course, suspicion isn't about cynicism, it's about balance. You don't want to be the person who believes nothing and trusts no one. Nobody likes a salt vampire at the party. But neither should you swallow every story, whole, as if it's the last hors d'oeuvre at a Roman banquet. Being discerning lets you enjoy the odd tall tale or wild rumour without rearranging your worldview around it. It's worth noting that not all salt is created equal. Sometimes just a dash will do, and other times you need a full salt mine. Official announcements from reputable sources, maybe a pinch, just in case. Wild claims from your Aunt Muriel's Facebook feed. Back up the truck and start shoveling. In a world saturated with spin, press releases, and social media influencers, knowing when and how much salt to apply is practically an Olympic sport. But there's also a second, quieter lesson here. Humility. Taking things with a grain of salt is a gentle reminder that none of us, not even Pliny the Elder, has a monopoly on truth. People can be wrong, whether by mistake, misinformation, or a particularly creative imagination. Sifting through stories with a skeptical but open-minded attitude means accepting that sometimes what we hear may be just a little off, or, on rare occasions, spectacularly true. So, the next time you hear about ancient Roman toad-based business deals, or the latest viral miracle food, remember, a little skepticism is as timeless as salt itself. Sprinkle wisely. Because in the end, whether it's guarding against poisoning or propaganda, a grain of salt is the ultimate flavor enhancer. 1 part common sense, 1 part curiosity, and all ancient wisdom. And that's a truth you can actually believe, at least if you take it with a grain of salt. This phrase warns you not to overdo the cleanup. Unless you lived in a world where family bath night culminated in searching the tub for small, slippery relatives. Hygiene, always a slippery slope. But let's be honest, there's a certain temptation to just pull the plug and let everything swirl away, especially when what you're facing looks like a murky mess. Isn't that how we handle inboxes, relationships, or kitchen drawers? We get fed up, declare enough is enough, and then, in a fit of organisational zeal rivaling a Marie Kondo marathon, toss good, bad, and confusing indistinguishables all together into the landfill of regret. Unfortunately, while socks and old letters may not shout on their way down the chute, some things, babies, for one, are quite important to keep, even if they're just as hard to spot as a sock in a spin cycle of life. If you've ever been so eager to wipe the slate clean that you trash your doodles, your half-written poems, or that one sweater your grandmother made, even if it is, technically, unwearable, you know the cost of enthusiasm unchecked by discernment. History is full of people, companies, and governments scrubbing too hard and winding up with more than just scuffed tiles. Maybe it's the colleague who tries to fix office culture by banning all snacks. Sure, the ants are gone, but so is morale. Or the company updating its brand and, in the process, erasing decades of goodwill. Shout out to anyone who remembers New Coke. Why do we do it? Partly, cleaning house feels virtuous. There's clarity in getting rid of the old and the cluttered. It gives us the illusion of fresh starts. The danger creeps in when we mistake renewal for rejection of everything that came before. Picture it. You're organizing your collection, getting rid of what's broken, obsolete, or embarrassing, and you toss out an artifact actually worth keeping. It happens in friendships too. A dispute or a rough patch, and suddenly the baby, years of shared laughter, trust, understanding, is gurgling on its way down the drain because of one argument over movie choices or pizza toppings. The real skill lies not in the purge, but in the ability to discern. It means pausing before you hit delete on your hard drive or your life. It means looking at your habits and instincts. Am I just frustrated? Or is this thing truly no longer serving me? Is this belief outdated? Or have I not really taken the time to understand its value? That's harder, of course. Discernment is subtler than a spring cleaning binge. It requires more patience, a willingness to sit in discomfort, and sometimes, much to our chagrin, to admit that a messy tub might still be home to something wonderful, even if it isn't immediately visible. In everyday life, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater" encourages us to be thoughtful editors rather than reckless erasers. The next time you're tempted to wipe away everything, ideas, routines, friendships, the last remnants of your childhood collections, take a moment to sift through the suds. What, in all this mess, is actually precious? What is foundational? Sometimes, the most valuable things become indistinguishable from the clutter and the noise, be it in writing, in relationships, or in our personal beliefs. Protect them. Scrub the tub, by all means, but keep an eye out for the babies. They may just be what makes all the mess worth it, and if you must clean, perhaps just drain slowly. If you catch sight of a little hand, metaphorical or otherwise, reaching up from the depths, you'll be glad you gave it a second look. The moral of the tub: clean carefully, keep kindly, and remember, not every burden is meant for the drain. Some are reminders of who we've been and what, despite our best efforts, deserves to be saved. If you think Saved by the Bell is all about classrooms and pop culture, meet the horrifying 18th century solution to premature burial: bell cords, twitchy morticians, and the world's creepiest alarm clock. During the 1700s and 1800s, an epidemic of taphophobia, the fear of being buried alive, swept through Europe and America. Newspapers recounted stories, both real and imagined, of people who woke inside their own coffins, scratching desperately at the lid in the pitch dark, muffled underground. Whether or not all these tales were true hardly mattered. The public imagination was captured and utterly terrified. Medical science, still young and easily baffled by comas or seizures, handed down far too many incorrect diagnoses of death. The line between the sleeping and the expired was disturbingly blurry. So, as inventors are wont to do, a few decided to fix the problem. Enter the safety coffin. Picture a wooden coffin, but with a twist, a cord tied around the wrist of the deceased, threaded through a cleverly designed pipe, or tube, up to the surface. At the grave above, the cord ended in a small brass bell suspended from an iron frame. The idea was simple, if macabre. Should poor Uncle Fred wake to find himself 6 feet under, he could yank the string, sending that bell a-clattering through the cemetery. Graveyard caretakers, or in some cases, professional watchmen, would scurry over to see if one of their permanent residents needed assistance making a premature exit. The details of these contraptions border on the bizarre. Some designs even included feeding tubes, air pipes, or tiny periscope-like viewers so that the recently interred could review the living world above. Patent applications for these bizarre, life-saving coffins became something of a morbid trend in the late 1800s, with each inventor claiming theirs as the ultimate insurance policy against the grave's final mistake. Some brought impeccable engineering skills, others a deep appreciation for the theatrical. A few models looked more like someone's high-concept art project than a real-life burial device, complete with flags, whistles, or lanterns that would pop up through the dirt. There's even record of coffins wired with crude telegraph systems, less Morse code, and more sheer panic. Cultural anxieties drove this rush of innovation. It's one thing to ponder your own mortality. It's another to confront the prospect of waking up in velvet darkness, alone, too late for rescue. Famous names attach themselves to this cause. Author Hans Christian Andersen supposedly slept with a note by his bed, written in Tom. I fight Scheitchen am Teamstory. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, stricken with the same dread, insisted that his heart be pierced after death to guarantee there were no mistakes. Of course, the practicalities didn't always match the hope. Bells would clang in the wind, set off by weather or animals, or the natural settling of the coffin. In a few, possibly apocryphal, tales, caretakers arrived breathless and shovel-ready, only to discover that the ringing came from nothing more than a twitching corpse or a particularly enthusiastic squirrel. These false alarms rendered watchmen twitchy and perpetually on edge, a sort of nocturnal neighbourhood watch with more than a whiff of gothic horror about it. Despite the invention's mechanical ingenuity, the chance of a successfully saved bell ringer seems vanishingly small. Nonetheless, the legacy of these safety coffins lingers, tucked away in our language and our lore. Next time you hear the phrase, saved by the bell, remember it's not just about last-minute classroom escapes or boxing rounds. It's a throwback to a world obsessed with the borders between life and death, and to a time when an ounce of prevention was measured in brass, string, and a chilling midnight chime. Let me know if you want more historical sources, specific anecdotes, or more humour and atmosphere. Here's your extended segment at approximately 600 words, matching your structure, tone, and style. To be armed to the teeth comes from pirates, gun-crazy, paranoid, and always a little over-accessorized, who stopped just short of chewing their own flintlocks. Picture the wide open sea, the sail creaking, the glint of cutlasses, and a handful of sweaty, bearded men bristling with weapons, pistols jammed into belts, blades tucked into boots, and a few more pistols for good measure. Just in case the first, second, third, or fourth jammed, misfired, or got accidentally dropped overboard. The pirate who coined armed to the teeth wasn't content with a solitary flintlock. He was an arms rack with a pension. Makes sense if you think about their world. The clunky, muzzle-loading pistols of the early 18th century were about as reliable as a treasure map on a wet napkin. Firing more than one shot. Forget it. Pirates improvised. Sling as many weapons onto your body as humanly possible. One bites the dust. Reach for another. Hip, thigh, sleeve, hat. The only place pirates didn't keep a weapon was in their mouth, but that probably had more to do with dental hygiene than practicality. Still, more firepower meant more chances to survive the chaos of a messy boarding. But this phrase isn't only about literal weaponry. Armed to the teeth signals readiness for conflict, maybe too much readiness. It's an embrace of the maxim, better safe than sorry, cranked up past 11. It's the ancient ancestor of today's overpacked traveller, the person who sees the phrase carry on only as a personal challenge to physics. Picture a nervous teenager headed for the first day at a new school, loaded with pens, snacks, note cards, backup snacks, and a lucky rabbit's foot, all hidden somewhere in their oversized backpack. That's armed to the teeth for the cafeteria wars. Of course, there's a flip side. Being armed to the teeth is often more about the theatre of intimidation than actual utility. Pirates were some of history's greatest showmen, brandishing iron and steel not just for the functionality, but for the spectacle. A ship rolling up beside your vessel, bristling with pointy things pointed in your direction, is a powerful persuasion tool. Often, pirates preferred their prey to throw down arms and hand over the rum without a fight. No captain bothered with parley when he was facing a pack of gun-toting, over-accessorized pirates who made the weapon aisle at a department store look understocked. The phrase leapt from the decks of pirate sloops into the common tongue, stowing away in our language. Nowadays, armed to the teeth doesn't even require a single weapon. It's a way to call out someone's preparedness, sometimes bordering on absurdity. The office worker who brings 6 pens, 3 highlighters, and a backup stapler to the meeting, armed to the teeth. The nervous hiker who packs a bear bell, mace, whistle, 2 GPS trackers, and a satellite phone just to stroll around a busy national park, armed to the teeth, and then some. But maybe, just maybe, armed to the teeth is also a little parable about humanity's unending campaign to feel in control, to ward off uncertainty with sheer volume. Whether it's muskets, multi-tools, or mental checklists. Like pirates centuries ago, we fashion our own armour against the unknown, layering on supplies, just in case the seas get rough. So next time you find yourself double-checking your bag for that extra, that probably unnecessary item, tip your hat to the pirates, those anxious, hyper-prepared souls who taught the world that sometimes you really can be too ready for trouble. At least you're not loading your teeth. Yet, if you want to paint the town red, you're channeling 19th century British aristocrats who relieved stress by literally smearing paint, and sometimes blood, across entire villages. Yikes. Today we just settle for karaoke. Let's rewind to the infamous night that inspired this phrase. Picture England, 1837. A crew of wealthy young nobles, one of them the Marquis of Waterford, notorious for pranks and public mischief, rolled into the serene town of Melton Mowbray. Fueled by alcohol, bravado, and probably a double dare, they snatched up red paint from a local shop. Using doors, windows, even a local toll gate, they went on a gleeful vandalism spree, splattering sticky crimson everywhere. The chaos became legendary. Even the local constable wasn't spared, ending up painted head to toe and probably questioning his life choices. When newspapers splashed headlines like, "Aristocrats paint the town red," the phrase stuck, outliving the scandal by centuries. It evolved into the harmless but infectiously fun saying we know today: going out and having an outrageously good time, no paint required. Let's be honest, most of us paint the town red not with anarchy, but with a flurry of apps and a group text that can never agree on a meeting spot. It's less daring escapade, more 10-minute selfie at the bar, followed by a debate over pizza toppings. Still, there's an energy in the phrase, a permission slip to break routine and let loose, even if these days it means an extra scoop of ice cream and some questionable dance moves in your living room. What's wild is how this phrase, with such unruly origins, now crops up everywhere from musical lyrics to journalistic headlines. Remember that Rihanna hit? "Let's paint the town red," she declares, as millions nod along, channeling that spirit of defiant celebration. Even Hollywood loves it. How many buddy comedies turn on a quiet protagonist learning to let loose, inevitably painting the town red by the closing credits? Note, most of us are very glad the red is now metaphorical. Town councils everywhere breathe easier. Digging deeper, there's psychology at work here. Sociologists argue that painting the town red taps into our need for ritual release, for giving ourselves designated time and space to throw order out the window. Call it Mardi Gras, call it a birthday bash, call it karaoke night. We all crave a brief escape from our sensible selves. The phrase is a password for breaking out, rebelling, just enough to remember what real fun feels like. Maybe that's why the phrase endures. It's cheeky, rebellious, and just a little bit risky. Even if our risk is trying wasabi-flavoured popcorn instead of the usual butter. When someone says, "Let's go out and paint the town red," there's an instant spark. Plans form. Expectations shift. You're not just getting a drink, you're about to make a memory, good or bad, at least worth telling. The next time you rally your friends for a night out, take a second to appreciate the journey this phrase has taken, from real 19th century paint and the occasional brawl, to today's much friendlier forms of letting loose. Whether you're unleashing your inner diva with karaoke, or simply enjoying an extra scoop of gelato while the city lights sparkle, you're part of a long tradition of shaking things up. So go on, paint the town red. Just maybe leave the actual paint at home. History has proven. Fun is mandatory, property damage is optional. Jump on the bandwagon, and you're part of the great American tradition of following circus acts and political fads, ideally before anyone decides to actually examine where this wagon is going. But let's take a step back. The phrase "jump on the bandwagon" didn't originate in tech boardrooms or in the latest social media blitz. It hails from literal bandwagons, the horse-drawn platforms that paraded through towns in the 19th century. Musicians blaring on top, drums pounding, and crowds flocking behind. Politicians, sensing an opportunity, quickly realised that riding atop a bandwagon wasn't just good fun, it was good publicity. If there's a crowd gathered, Why not stand tall and wave your campaign banner, soaking up the applause? From that moment on, every savvy candidate, and eventually almost every industry, figured out that being seen on the right bandwagon could mean the difference between a groundswell and a limp turnout at the fair. In modern times, the bandwagon effect is the lifeblood of trends, from TikTok challenges to cryptocurrency crazes, from artisan bread starters to early adoption of standing desks. As a society, we are irresistibly drawn to what everyone else is doing, even, perhaps especially, when the logic breaks down. There's something comforting, a kind of psychological safety net, in joining a crowd. If the wagon collapses, at least you weren't alone. Of course, jumping on the bandwagon is almost never about deep conviction or thoughtful analysis. It's about momentum, hype, and the allure of the new. Think about how ideas percolate in any workplace. One day you're sitting quietly at your desk, content with your old ways, until an email arrives announcing a dynamic shift. Maybe an agile transformation initiative, or mandatory mindfulness breaks, or a new game-changing app for collaborative scheduling that promises to synchronize office harmony right down to your lunch breaks. One brave soul, often from marketing, hails the tool as revolutionary, and suddenly everyone wants in. Not because they've understood it, but because the wheels are already turning. The bandwagon effect feeds on the fear of missing out. If the bandwagon is passing by and you hesitate, not only do you risk being left behind, you might be perceived as willfully outdated, out of touch, or even stubbornly contrarian. The pressure isn't always overt. Sometimes it's a rising tide of LinkedIn posts celebrating the latest industry shift, or a swell of Slack messages as teammates race to showcase enthusiasm. Each new thumbs up is another jolt of momentum. The wagon lurches forward again, now heavier with riders and echoing with the din of consensus. And yet, we're all familiar with what happens when the bandwagon takes a sharp turn. Perhaps the new policy is a dud, the app doesn't sync, or the purported trend fizzles out. Just as quickly as the bandwagon filled up, the crowd quietly dismounts, glancing around for the next big thing. Rarely do we stop to ask who was steering, or why we all felt the need to climb aboard in the first place. The cycle resets. A new wagon, a new tune, and another opportunity to leap, ideally without looking. So, is it wrong to jump on the bandwagon? Not inherently. At its best, the bandwagon effect can foster belonging and spread genuinely useful innovations. At its worst, it can lead us blindly off course, all in a desperate attempt not to be left holding the reins of yesterday's ideas. The next time you hear a raucous parade approaching, ask yourself, is this wagon heading where I want to go, or am I just dazzled by the noise? In the end, every bandwagon is a reminder. Decide when to jump on, and just as importantly, when to step off. A hands-down win comes from the racetrack, where your victory was so certain you could literally loosen your grip on the reins. These days, the only thing people win hands down is arguing about the best pizza topping. The phrase itself paints a vivid picture. Imagine a jockey galloping way out in front, so sure of the finish, line that they don't even need to hang on tight anymore. Hands down, the horse will win. No last-minute scramble, just a relaxed, almost effortless glide past the competition. This is not your photo finish heart-racing sort of win. It's confidence in motion, where the outcome is never in doubt. If you've ever had a moment where the result was so obvious you could relax completely, you've experienced a hands-down victory, even if it was over something totally inconsequential, like choosing what's for dinner with SARS. We still say hands down to mean easily, or by a large margin. It's especially popular when there's some kind of contest, official or otherwise. She's hands down the funniest person in the office, you might hear, or This is hands down the best coffee I've ever had. The phrase acts as a verbal exclamation point, a way of shutting down debate with total assurance. No further questions, no tiebreakers, no need for a recount. The result is crystal clear. But while the racetrack origins are now a bit distant, hands down has galloped its way into all corners of modern conversation. In sports, a team can win hands down against an opponent, leaving spectators with no need to check the scoreboard twice. In academic settings, a student might be hands down the best in the class, a grade far ahead of the pack. Even in everyday life, you might hear it when someone raves, "That's hands down my favourite movie," moving beyond mere preference into the territory of certainty. What's interesting is how the phrase has maintained its energy while shifting scenes. We aren't literally racing horses anymore, unless you happen to have a time machine or a very unusual commute, but the sense of assurance and domination is intact. It works because we love clear winners. There's satisfaction in results that leave no room for ambiguity. And when someone declares a hands-down favourite, we know they're not hedging their bets. We also wield hands down as a tool in debates. Pizza toppings. Pineapple is hands down the most controversial. Best sitcom? People will argue, but some shows win hands down in the polls. No contest. At family dinners, there are hands down kitchen victories and hands down flops, and probably at least one uncle who claims to win hands down at everything from cornhole to Trivial Pursuit. Like many expressions rooted in competition, hands down provides an easy shortcut for storytellers. It saves us from having to compare granular details and lets us go straight to the conclusion. This is not just good, it's untouchably, obviously good. Of course, in the spirit of competition, hands-down victories can sometimes breed a little resentment among the runners-up. No one likes to be bested so thoroughly. But for the winner, it's an unbeatable moment of triumph. It's worth noting the phrase has aged well, dodging the fate of so many other idioms that have faded out with the customs that inspired them. Despite our lives being less horse-centered and more screen-centered, we all appreciate the rare occasion when a win is so obvious. Nobody can dispute it. So next time you hear someone claim victory, not by a nose, but by a mile, they might just be picturing themselves, reins slack, hands down, coasting to the finish line. And in a world full of close races, a hands-down win just feels all the sweeter. Lastly, there's Steal My Thunder. Dennis literally invented a thunder machine for his plays, only for rivals to snatch his sound effects. Long before copyright law, there was just old-fashioned theatrical sabotage. In 1709, London's Drury Lane Theatre was a hotbed of jealousies, backstabbing, and loud, dramatic spectacles, quite literally, thanks to Dennis and his contraption. He was a minor playwright with a flair for spectacle, and he poured his savings into building a device that recreated the crackle and rumble of an approaching storm. A gigantic sheet of thin metal, shaken by an assistant backstage, mimicked the sound so convincingly that it left audiences momentarily awestruck. For a brief moment, Dennis had thunder all to himself, an exclusive special effect, a rarity in the cutthroat world of Restoration theatre. But Dennis's triumph was short-lived. Only days later, he attended another company's production and was horrified to recognize the distinctive roar of his thunder design echoing through the auditorium. "Damn them," he's rumored to have exclaimed. "They will not let my play run, but they steal my thunder." Cue Shakespearean levels of pettiness. In an age without intellectual property rights or NDAs, it only took the slip of a stagehand and a nosy competitor to turn someone's invention into community property overnight. This single moment of thunderous betrayal left Thomas Dennis not only out of pocket, but also with a peculiar legacy. Ever since, to steal someone's thunder has meant to hijack someone else's idea or dramatic reveal, cutting ahead with a bolt from the blue twist that wasn't yours to unveil. The phrase has rolled down centuries of egos, creative industries, and office meetings, surfacing every time someone gets upstaged in spectacular fashion. Behind the scenes of Dennis's invention, though, was a much messier, more human landscape. Theatres in his day were rowdy, smoky, haphazard assemblies of people and props, where every ingenious workaround was instantly at risk of being pilfered by the competition. Actors and playwrights alike lived precariously, one flop away from ruin, and everyone was constantly scanning for someone else's advantage to copy or outdo. Thunder machines became a fleeting edge in a business built on spectacle, gossip, and one-upmanship. Even the audiences, packed shoulder to shoulder with society's finest and rowdiest, played a role in this ongoing arms race. The very nature of theatre was to shock, delight, and outdo last week's headline performance. It isn't hard to imagine a row of powdered wigs whispering about the newest thunder or the reputational fallout when a rival show managed to literally make more noise. So, Steal My Thunder is more than just about showbiz. It's about the universal experience of pouring your heart, and maybe your entire allowance, into something, only to watch it whisked away by someone waiting in the wings. We've all experienced it. A brainstorm lifted in a meeting, a punchline borrowed at dinner, the deflation when someone else takes the credit for your bright idea. Dennis's thunder reverberates every time we feel that gut punch of being scooped. And yet, there's a backhanded sort of validation. If your thunder's worth stealing, you must be onto something good. Dennis may have lost his sound effect, but he gained a place in the dictionary. An immortality of sorts, even if it was built on indignation and a metallic clang echoing through the ages. So as we wrap up tonight's history of idioms, spare a thought for every Thomas Dennis, the creators whose moments in the spotlight were whisked away, only for their grumbles to evolve into the language we can't live without. Their thunder got stolen, but at least the echo lingers on. So tonight, as you settle deeper into your mattress that, hopefully, isn't stuffed with straw or scandalous secrets, take a moment to marvel at the tangled web of words we use every day. For hundreds of years, people struggled, schemed, gossiped, and survived. And somehow, between the leaky ceilings, suspicious buckets, and merciless hat-making, they managed to invent the phrases that have burrowed their way into our collective vocabulary. Maybe history was messier, grosser, and filled with way more livestock-related mishaps than we'd like to admit, but it gave us the gift of weird, comforting idioms. The next time you break the ice at work or feel weird about spilling the beans, remember some exhausted ancestor who literally did just that. Let's tip our nightcaps to those stubborn, hilarious, ever-inventive people who weathered the storms of history and left us a language as ridiculous as it is enduring. So as you drift off, cozy in your bed, remember, history may be bizarre and sometimes deeply uncomfortable, but it's also sleeping proof that somehow, despite it all, we always find the words. Good night.